So my name is Matt Bendet. I'm a co-founder at PeerSpace, which is a marketplace for short-term space rental for all kinds of activities. We specialize in meetings, events, and film and photo production. So we launched the business in early 2014 in San Francisco, and we've since grown to over 12 markets. We're hoping to round out the major U.S. metros by the end of the year, and it's been quite a ride, quite a journey. We're nowhere near the finish line, or at least where I want to go. But yeah, that's PeerSpace.
And Fran.
Hi, my name is Fred Meyer. I'm CEO and founder of BabyQuip. We deliver baby gear to traveling families. We're not quite 3 years old, but we're in 400 markets with 450 providers. We're like the Airbnb of baby gears, or we could probably work together, find some ways of getting out together. This is my fifth startup. My first was a marketplace called Match.com in the late 90s. And then I was at Trustee, was my last company, where I was CEO and executive director and all kinds of roles. So,
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you, both of you joining us and sharing your stories. So I think, when you look at the marketplace, so much that's been discussed is this importance of trust. And so with trust comes friction, sometimes friction on the demand side, sometimes friction on the supply side. So knowing who's transacting in your platform and what does that mean? So take me through, and Matt, you and I've talked about this a couple of times, like how do you look at trust and how do you make the decisions and trade-offs when it comes to trust and friction?
Right. So whenever you're launching, working in an online marketplace, the fundamentals are to connect two strangers for a transaction. And what makes trust so important is the feeling that you will get what you're paying for, and that the experience of that transaction, of the product or the services going from the seller to the buyer, is also a pleasant experience. And that when that all comes together, that's where you get incredible value, because you can run an asset-light marketplace, in the case of PeerSpace, where we don't own or operate any inventory ourselves, and really focus on the value that we bring in reducing the friction to finding a unique space, for example. So for us, trust is one of the key pillars of our product feature roadmap. And it's something that we have to pay attention to, because if you don't have that trust, your conversion rate's going to suffer. And if you build up too much friction, though, to create a trustworthy marketplace, you might also not convert as many bookings. So it's a constant daily trade-off. And as a growing marketplace, we've had different emphasis on it, more or less, as we've grown. In certain stages when growth was a bigger priority for us, some of the trust feature set may not prioritize as high as the growth feature for referring other users to the marketplace, for example. So you really have to sort of prioritize accordingly to your business's goals, what your fundraising targets are, how much traction you need to have. But it's definitely that thing that's always hanging over your marketplace that you really need to have dialed in if you're going to have a successful, high transacting, high value markaplease.
Good. And Fran, given the nature of your marketplace,
Babies.
yes,
Oh
right.
my God.
Trust is huge. Right? So take us through kind of how you approach
kidding?
it, right? Yeah, it's
Yes.
table stakes.
So one of the first things that I knew, that if I was going to lead this company, I needed to know I could get insurance, because I have assets and babies. I mean, God forbid something happens, right? So I pay through the nose on liability insurance, and we co-insure our providers, and they pay us for the insurance. So I haven't been at times I make a little margin on it. Sometimes I make a little less or none, but kind of critical to have that, mostly to get the supply side to get bought in. Most of our supply side are stay-at-home moms. A lot of them own their own homes and have assets as well. It's also differentiating to parents. We haven't had a single claim yet. So I think it has a high perceived value, high expense, but kind of critical. And the other way that's critical is that it keeps transactions on our platform, because, of course, we're not going to cover a transaction off platform. So it helps with the disintermediation. But I'll tell you, we do a lot of other things, because the reality is if our suppliers are not willing to step up on delivering clean and safe gear, if they don't check the recall list, we're going to have bigger problems. So we actually put them through a vetting process and make them pay to get on the platform. Someone has a filtering process to improve overall trust.
Yes, there's a little bit of hurdle to get on the platform, make sure that they're actually engaged and interested and are going to deliver on the value that you're out there selling to your
Now, the reality is most of these, they're fanatical. I mean, we have a private community on Facebook where they share ideas and things like that. And they'll take a picture, oh, look at this high chair I got back. How should I clean it? And there'll be 20 comments on different approaches to it. So it really has not turned out to be a problem, but I think it's because we got in front of it.
And so, when you and I spoke, we talked about a series of growth hacks that you've employed, right? So community is one of those. The insurance has been another. You have some other growth hacks that you've done to ensure you build this network effect on your marketplace.
So one of the things that we've done is when new people come onto our platform as suppliers, we tell them, list everything. Here's 40 items. Just turn them all on. Doesn't matter if you don't have them, because what we're going to do is we're going to pay you as soon as you get the order. Not as soon as when you complete the order, but when you get the order. And what that means is people build up their inventory. So let's say they get an order and they don't have the high chair or the car seat or the toy box, but they've got the money in their bank account. They're highly motivated to fulfill that order and go and get the gear. And since we're not strictly on demand, I mean, most orders come in advance, they can build their inventory as they get the orders. And so we don't even have an inventory control or inventory management system, because I don't really want them to have the ability to not take an instant order. And that's been one of our growth hacks. Now, recently, we put in the ability to transfer an order. So if you can't do it for some reason, you can transfer to another provider in your market. But we'll get to inventory, at least on cribs, because you can't get cribs in a day. But everything else you can pretty much get in a day. And it's really helped build, I talk to our providers, they have multiple cribs, car seats, strollers, but the right kind of things for their market.
Well, so one of the things this morning, Rogers Lee's opening session from Battery, he talked about these services that unlock the value of your marketplace. And oftentimes, those are not things you think about early on. They're things that you identify as you're growing and pivoting and talking to your customers. So Matt, Fran, some of those are the growth hacks you have now, right? So Matt, at PeerSpace, have you guys identified some of those as well that you think help continue to unlock and increase the velocity?
Yeah, I think what our ultimate goal is we are a pretty broad marketplace. You can book space for any kind of activity outside the home or office. And like I said, those three kind of main verticals that we've internally identified are meetings, events, and productions, generally attract a totally different type of customer, at least on that initial purchase. And so where we think that the real network effects happen, both geographically and then internally amongst our guests, is through the cross promotion of all the different activities that you actually can use PeerSpace for. And so that's one area that we really try to think about how we're going to keep our frequency of use high when they might be planning a birthday party that happens once a year, right? How do we provide that inception that makes you think about this business case for you to have an event at, or to hold a meeting or something like this even. So we do think a lot about those types of aspects to get us to a place where once we've acquired you, we sort of own you, have a moat around you, and can start to build that LTV up, because it can be pretty costly when you're going after a specific vertical to find that audience, and you want to be mindful of your unit economic sustainability.
Fran, have you identified others?
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of things bubble up from our community. So, for example, I'm really thrilled about this. About 25 are doing an Easter egg event and offering that to people who are renting gear over the Easter holiday, which is coming up later next month. And that together with some other of our providers who have put together party packs, we're probably going into the kid party business too. And that's more just looking at what's happening on our platform and thinking, okay, it's a little bit different. We'll have to change this, that, and the other. But that's how we'll expand and deepen our relationship.
Good, good. And I know we were all just in the apartment list presentation listening to Chris talk about aligning incentives. And I think, that certainly is another challenge for marketplaces is either, they're focused on the demand side or the supply side. But how do you ensure that you actually have these aligned incentives to see the growth that you're looking for? And, Fran, I know you're a little bit earlier in the mat. So what does that look like for you in your business and aligning those incentives?
Yeah, so, one of the things that was really challenging is all the competitors are mom and pops or franchise businesses where they gave a whole market to one person. And from the get-go, I didn't think that was the way to do it. I thought there was more demand and we'd be able to build the brand and build a business by having multiple people. And so that's been on a by-market basis, though. We have to be careful that we don't put too much supply until we have the time or the money to build up the demand.
Yep.
And so increasingly we're looking market by market, trying to make some calls on whether or not, at the very beginning I was like, throw people in these markets. And now there's a few of them, Denver for whatever reason, or Phoenix, where I want to make sure that the unit economics for the players is good enough before we add more. That being said, overall the strategy's been right. It's just that with limited funding, you can't always get it right in every single marketplace. But overall, it's the right call.
Matt, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the things you're saying are still very relevant to us. You've got the cold start problem with markets, which require investment in something that might not be a sustainable unit economics for you. So you really want to make sure that you're getting to a critical amount of demand and supply around the same time, so you have something that can be liquid and grow in a more sustainable clip going forward. We've seen a lot of those kinds of issues come up, but in terms of being able to get the incentives aligned, we also have what I think is a major benefit for both of our marketplaces is we believe there's a very big demand pool out there and the supply is all fragmented. So what we're trying to do is bring all of these unique, hidden, undiscovered spaces. A space like this, for example, is a venue, but it's also like a closed membership club. So being able to expose that to all kinds of guests who are looking to have these types of events are that's our big play, and I think that is the secret sauce that we could bring in this marketplace. Now we really have to focus on reducing the friction as much as possible, while to the first point, making sure that it's a very trustworthy transactional experience, and that's where I think we unlock immense value.
Good. One of the things we did talk about collectively as well is just payments, right? So where does payments enter this, right? So obviously you're enabling these transactions on your platform. How do you think about payments to either increase trust or incentivize a certain type of behavior? So either one of you can tackle that one first. And
I mean, I could talk a little bit about, I think payments for an earlier stage company can sometimes be at odds with increasing trust. And so you want to think about the selling benefits there too. For us, we talk about the fact that we control the escrow of the payments, meaning we've got the money, it's sitting in PeerSpace's account, the guest pays in full at the time that they make every booking, and it's released to the host at the completion of the booking. If they cancel in accordance with our cancellation policy, the host will get paid out for not having to host the venue or the event experience. So that's kind of one way, that's sort of where you're able to kind of take the table stakes of payments and turn it into a feature. But I think on the other side of that, what we try to do is mitigate the risk that could be present with fraud, and that's where sometimes we have to make these trade-offs around barriers. And so how we've tried to be smart about it is not introduce the barriers when the host or the guest is not ready to transact, or to collect information in a piecemeal way. On the supply side, if we're doing verifications for banking, you may not need all the verifications until you've transacted a certain volume from us, something like that. So we build features in a very contextual, events-driven manner to be able to make that payment process as frictionless as we can.
Yeah, I would just add that I think we're probably going to use payments as reward systems as we go on. We might not be able to continue to do what we're doing in terms of fast payment because of issues with fraud, but for now it's worked out. I think we're also, just at the very beginning, the fact that we do the transaction and schedule the deliveries and communicate with everybody involved takes an enormous load off people trying to disintermediate, and it's hard.
Yeah.
And so I think having a very fluid and integral payments process, even though it's table stakes,
Yep.
you'd be surprised how often it doesn't happen and how important it is. Or
Yep.
maybe not surprised.
I mean, I'm probably not surprised because I talk to lots of marketplaces, but I do think there is this kind of journey of payments and how people think of when I start, I just need to connect the rails and enable commerce to happen, and then it starts to become a differentiator over time. And as we've listened to some of the larger either marketplaces today or even the VCs talk about, the next wave of marketplaces being fintech infused, right? And you're already doing some of that now, Fran, with like selling insurance specific to the providers that you're working with, and so I think that becomes the new expectation. I think that's the other interesting thing with marketplaces is the consumers and the users of these marketplaces is evolving so quickly that how do we anticipate and plan for what those changes and integrations look like?
Yeah.
So with that, I wanted to just make sure we had a few minutes for any questions from the audience. Otherwise, I have a few more questions of my own. But does anybody have a question that they'd like to ask? Matt or Fran? Okay. Sorry, we're getting
We're boring them.
What's kind of fun though is there are so many, and I'm sure you do this too, Matt. I rent my house on Airbnb and on HomeAway, and they are constantly doing things with new payments. And I'm like, oh, I better think about that idea. Can I copy this, that, and the other? Why not?
Yeah, I mean, it's always great to be influenced by others that have come before you and be able to understand why they offer some of those unique payment options. I mean, we see just from our users, there's different things that we have a long roadmap for on payments we'd like to add. We want crowdsourcing of bookings to be able to happen instead of having one person providing full payment. Installments, deposits, those are things that are part of the entrenched older way of doing things offline that we just need to bring in to the marketplace in a better way. And then surprisingly, there's offline transactions that you want to bring into the platform. So the day of every booking that's happening, if the host wants to sell additional equipment, like camera rental, for example, in a production photography studio, we need to be able to give them tools to easily be able to do that through the app. And one thing I was thinking about, just going back to the table stakes of payments, the big moat that you start to build is data over time. So when you're collecting a lot of transactions through your platform, the host is going to start to find more value in the fact that that's all tracked in one place. And it's broken out, and there's statistics around what you were paid for, whether it was for the space or for the add-ons that you provided. And that's going to keep the disintermediation lower, I believe, over time.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting into tax season, and we just released to our providers a way that they could see exactly what was in each of their payments so that they could do a better job at filing their taxes. And that alone is a motivator for them to put things on the platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are the interesting services that we'll see, right, as a full stack marketplace offering end to end. I think the one thing, and I often talk about it, I think Uber we kind of put up as this poster child of like what this intimate customer experience looks like and how do we replicate that. But you're seeing lots and lots of other companies, Apple issuing a credit card and a number of other things where people are now trying to lock in and build these highly differential moats around their marketplaces and what they're doing. And the flow of funds seems to be one of the ways that that's happening, because ultimately that's why people are coming to a marketplace, is to transact, right? So making sure you can handle online and offline is certainly important in a trusted fashion.
Yeah, absolutely. The offline component is to me one of the most interesting ones. We know that that's the biggest part of the experience is what's happening on the day of, and as a marketplace, PeerSpace isn't there. And so whether that's about the transactions that could be taking place that we can provide value around being able to capture and account for those better, or it's just letting people know that this booking that they're at is in a PeerSpace location, and this is what PeerSpace is, and this is how you can use it. Those are really top of mind for us.
Fran, anything else you want to add before we
I'm good.
Great. Well, I appreciate everybody joining us. Thank you very much, Fran and Matt. Appreciate it. Thank you.